fight or flight. The middle of the road is no longer right.
All right. Well, welcome to a, let's see, what is today? Wednesday. And it is the 25th, the weekend before Halloween 2023. My name's Chris Anthony. Welcome to Nash Talk. Now, before I begin and bring on my special guest today, I want to first point out that I am, if you can look in the background, you can see it's not a studio setting. It is actually, I'm in North Detroit, you know, like Journey, South Detroit. I'm actually in North Detroit. I'm about 20 miles north of Detroit. I had to come back. This is my hometown, take care of some things. And my guest, who I met in Nashville, and I've seen him play a few times and just was really impressed by his uniqueness. He's also not in Nashville currently. I think he's in Richmond, Virginia. So he's in the background and he's ready to go. We call that the green room. He can see and hear me. You can't. And in a minute, we're going to bring him on in about a few seconds. But before we do that, I just want you to know, if you see this later, it is being broadcast live. It is currently noon, 12:03 Eastern Standard Time to be exact. And this will be in rotation both on Facebook, YouTube, Slice of Nashville, and we're also going to be sharing it with Instagram, LinkedIn, and a host of other places. Okay, so I don't even want to hesitate anymore, and I always hate saying this, but without further ado, isn't it cheesy? Without further ado, here he is, my man right here, and this is Kanude. Hey, how you, brother?
Hey,
how you doing?
What's going on, Mr. Anthony? How you doing,
brother? I'm doing good. Let me expand the screen. There we are, a little bit closer. I was doing
a little riff here for you. I was doing, get up, everybody gonna move their feet. Get down, everybody gonna leave their seat. I can't really do it on acoustic guitar that well. And if you don't recognize that, if you're of the millennial or whatever, that's Kiss, Detroit Rock City, one of my formative bands.
You know, it's funny that you say that. I guess we're going to start off there. I have a lot of friends, even back in the day. When I was a kid, I wasn't as big a Kiss fan but I was in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I met these two young brothers, and I had a brother. So there was a guy that was about my age, a little younger, and then there was my brother who was 3 years younger, and his brother, which was about the same. So there was four of us, and they were Kissaholics. And this was back, I'm dating myself, but it was back when they first came out, the double albums and the Star Chart.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and the original
double platinum. That was what their big, one of their big records.
And then it's like I got to grow up. I would be at the gym working out, and guys would have Kiss tattoos and things like that. Well, now they're doctors, and I saw one of them in Detroit. They were in Detroit like about 4 days ago.
Oh, really? Yeah, they just played Bridgestone a couple nights ago in Nashville. Yeah,
right. And I saw a bunch of guys.
And a buddy of mine who's recording, I'm recording with Chris Rodriguez, who's played with everybody, Keith Urban and Amy Grant and Kenny Loggins. He's recorded on some new work that I'm doing that we'll talk about in a little bit. But he was there, and I was like, damn, man, you know, all these years I just have not. That's one of the bands that was a big deal for me that I still have yet to see. You know, that's so cool.
Yeah, and I've never got to see them. There's a lot of people that I haven't seen that I wanted to see. I've never got to see Elton John.
Yeah, I've never seen Elton John.
Yeah, there's a bunch of. I've seen all kinds. I've seen Van Halen like 9 times. But
there's so many. I mean, if we start talking about that, well, I mean, back to Detroit. God, I mean, I have not really had a chance to play there, but that music scene. I mean, Iggy and the Stooges and the MC5. I mean, that's such an amazing time. And I really don't. I mean, of course, the White Stripes, and I got to see Jack White's wife a couple nights, and Jack was there playing at the Blue Room in Nashville a weekend or so ago, and so he's obviously that was a much later scene that came out of Detroit, but yeah, I mean, every town's got its own magical history, especially cities like Detroit, you know, with music. It's just beautiful.
Yeah, I was just, in fact, it's funny to say that when I as soon as I arrived in downtown Detroit, because I have to go to downtown Detroit, I stopped at this famous tamale place. So, and probably the best in the world. And right next door, literally not even 25 feet, not even,
Yeah.
I was at Jack White's last house. It was shaped like a dome. It was
Oh,
right by
wow.
the train station, and so I took pictures of it. But he
Nice.
left there because I guess he was constantly getting broke into or something. I think his brother lived there. So then he ended up going to Nashville, like Kid
Right.
Rock. Now Eminem, on the other hand, he stayed, and Bob Seger, he's always been here.
Yeah.
And Glenn Fry from the Eagles, he was from here, but I think he was living elsewhere.
Yeah.
But
Bob Seger.
yeah,
Yeah.
Bob is probably the biggest of all of them, even over Ted Nugent and everybody. But I don't know. Kid Rock seems to have a, like you said, millennial effect, because even downtown on Broadway in Nashville, they have a Kid Rock bar, completely devoted.
Yeah. I was at the Americana Fest the one in 2022, a little over a year ago, and Dan Auerbach of the Black Keys has a label called Easy Eye Sound, and I was fortunate enough to go to. Actually, it's here. Funny enough, it's actually here on my studio wall. I actually framed the, it's kind of reflecting the community fish fry, and it's the Black Keys, and Hank Williams played, and Nikki Lane. She's amazing. If you don't know her stuff, she's an incredible artist. And her last album was produced by Josh Homme of Queens of the Stone Age. Great rock, more of a rock album, even though she's a country artist. But I got to hang with Kid Rock. He was there hanging out, and Dan had his old 70s Good Times van, and he's all that you think he is. I was like, man, let's hang out in Dan's van. He's like, yeah, we can all do a reach around, man. And I'm like, oh, okay, that sounds good. He's just totally irreverent kind of guy, and everything you'd think he'd be. But anyway, that's my Kid Rock story.
It's funny, because I'm going to laser it back to you. It's funny because when I first met you, I was doing something over at Donato's, trying to create a new, like an open mic vibe where it wasn't just in-house. It was like what we're doing now. I wanted a live audience. And somebody says, well, what if only a couple people are watching? I replied, I said that it's the beauty of all this is it's recorded and it's streamed, and once it's on the internet, it never leaves the internet. And so years from now, somebody can go, look, I was there, and this is what I did, and so what I try to project with this is you can tell your story, and now it's gift wrapped in a package, or one of many I'm sure that you've had before and in the future. So I want to do it justice for you, because I think that when I met you, you had this kind of element of, I know you've got that maroon hat and the maroon, or what color would you call those pants? There you go.
I can't wear my hat with my headphones, but if you see me around, typically
I've never seen you without your hat before. So I've already given credence in the clear path with your headphones. So you gotta give me a pass. Yeah, no. And then I know you've got the feathers hanging in the back, and then, whatever. But here's the thing. You play guitar. It's from what I've seen, reasonably, very well. And I've seen you play keyboards, so you do that.
Yes.
What other instruments do you play?
That's really it. I mean, kind of my origin story music-wise, if we go back a ways, I grew up in Houston, and my dad was a Navy aviator, actually during Vietnam. So, but when I was, my parents eventually split up, but they ended up in Houston, and my dad got some work there in the energy industry, which is, not uncommon if you're a Houstonian. A lot of people work in the energy business, oil and gas and whatnot. But I started taking piano lessons probably when I was 9 or 10. For a couple years, maybe 10 or 11, 12. Mm-hmm. And around that time, in middle school, I was at a little school in Houston, and I got cast in a production. And this is definitely going to date me. And, we're probably around the same age bracket, but I'm in my 50s now. But at the time, I auditioned. I auditioned to be in the school musical, and that musical that I got cast in was called The Wizzy Wiz. And it basically was a mashup of the music from The Wizard of Oz and the movie reimagining The Wiz, which starred Diana Ross as Dorothy, Michael Jackson as the Scarecrow, Nipsey Russell, who was my character, as the Tin Man, and I'm forgetting who played the Lion. Somebody else can chime in on the chat or whatever later. But regardless, and my song, I still remember. Mine was the one from The Wiz. So and this is a production of predominantly white kids. So like, there's that. But I did my song, which was "Slide Some Oil to Me, Let It Trickle Down My Spine. If you don't got STP, Crisco will do just fine." Dun, dun, dun. So I still remember singing that song and just being totally caught the bug, just totally enraptured with performing. And so really, even before I was really performing or being in bands, at that young age, I was doing school musicals, the Sound of Music. Later, when I was a little older, West Side Story in Chicago, and some of these monumental classic music theater productions that were at least appropriate for all ages, more or less. And later on, it evolved as I got to be kind of in my late teens. I mean, I had a guitar, it's in the other room right now, so I can't bring it out. But my first guitar I got like at Christmas, which I asked for when I was maybe 12 or 13. And it took a bit. I didn't have a stage mom per se, so I was evolving into it. And as I got a little bit older and I went off to college, I thought I got into video. I was kind of scrawny, and in Texas, I don't know how it is now, but when you're in middle school, like 7th and 8th grade, all the boys have to be on the football team.
Football, yeah.
Friday, like it's mandatory if you're a young man to. And I was like, I was not very coordinated, and I was basically a bench warmer. And at that time, you started having cheaper video cameras available. These big VHS ones that you hold on your shoulder. Sure. And I got into that, and so I ended up being like the video guy for the sports teams, and I continued to do that into my last 2 years of high school. I was kind of a wild child, and it was more my relationship with my mom, and which was kind of testy, I'll say, just to be kind of PG rated about it. But regardless, kind of the best and only choice at the time was for me to go to military school, and I continued doing that video. And I found a like-minded student who was from Dallas. I was from Houston. We both had a similar upbringing, and we got to be buddies. And he was my roommate. And also then my roommate later on, I went to New York and then for a year, and then I moved back to Texas to go back to school, to go to college. And he was my roommate there. And that was while I was kind of figuring things out. And I had started in New York in that year. I was living in New York City, and I'm 19. I've dropped out of college because I wanted to be a filmmaker. I'd gone to Los Angeles out of military school, but I wasn't really focused. And I was it was a crazy time. It was the late 80s. There's a lot of like illicit drugs flying around, nose candy, all that kind of stuff. And I just said, I'm just not really, this is not working. So I went to New York, and I ended up answering an advertisement in the classifieds of the back of the Village Voice, which is a famous New York weekly newspaper, like so many, like the Nashville Scene or the Austin Chronicle, where I used to live. And it was an ad for a coast, like a songwriter, like singer looking for a collaborator. And so I started my first real songwriting project when I was 19 with a guy named Barry Christopher in New York. And later on, we formed a band, and I moved back to New York to be in that band, which I'll touch on later. But regardless, when I was living in Austin and I was back in school at the University of Texas, which I love to have that conversation with people in Nashville and Tennessee, the other UT, because there's the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, and there's the University of Texas in Austin, which is my alma mater. It was a really special time. You have to imagine, if you guys are younger here listening or watching, this is pre-internet. Everything kind of shifts in the 90s, in the early 2000s, to the new model that we're in now, which is enabling us to do what we're doing. be in completely different places, having this conversation over the internet. But back then, no one really knew, except maybe some scientists in Palo Alto or whatever, right? That this might be coming and what it would really mean to civilization, you know?
Mhm.
And at that time, my roommate was an actor named Owen Wilson, who's gone on to great success. And my good friend from my school back in Houston, he was back in Austin, and his name's Wes Anderson. And so if you don't know who those people are, check them out. Wes is a dear friend and has gone on to make some amazing movies over time. So I was in this little nexus of creative activity in Austin, Texas, especially in the early 90s. You had a movie called Slacker, and a guy named Richard Linklater, who was kind of documenting this scene. And I was in school. I'm in the music program. I'm studying English literature at the university. And I'm learning about electronic music, which was a great education for me. Even though I wasn't a music major studying theory and composition so much, I was expanding my knowledge about how to make music, doing things, amazing stuff. Like, I'll tell this story from time to time. We had an assignment where we had a little 2-track reel-to-reel deck, you know, and the assignment was to use a synthesizer to create what's called an ADSR. ADSR stands for attack, decay, sustain, and release. And that's what's called an envelope. And an envelope, basically, when you have an electronic envelope over a sound, it creates, the attack is how fast it hits the sound. And if it's percussive, it spikes up like a snare drum. Or if it's like a string, it goes, it kind of raises up and then, you know, tails off. And the assignment was to create a beat from scratch. And you had to use white noise, with a white noise generator, which is just like a type of noise with a certain, you know, frequency, which has a lot of high frequency, right?
Right.
And pink noise has more low frequency. White noise has more high frequency. It's like your TV back in the old days when you hear the static on the television. That's like white noise.
That's going back.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah. So the assignment at that time was to create a drum pattern using a white noise and you know, patching in this modular synthesizer. And so you'd record the white noise, and then you'd cut with a knife, with a little razor blade, the tape, and you'd measure out at how fast the tape was going, and you create a little beat, actually cutting and splicing the tape. So it'd be or whatever it was over the course of like 10 seconds. And doing something like that, now people take it for granted. You pull up Splice or Arcade or a few tools that I've used and people use and you have every sound imaginable to mankind, you know, every loop, every type of sound you could ever imagine. And I love that. I create tracks, you know, for people, and I'm happy to create a track for you. Reach out to me. You'll see all my socials online and whatnot. If you have a project going on, I love to make music in a traditional and also a fashion, like picking up a guitar or a keyboard at NSAI, where Chris and I have met, which is Nashville Songwriters Association. And that's the, you know, the old world, and sometimes the best way of creating music is being in a room with 2 or more people and sitting with an instrument and just mapping out an idea, writing lyrics and making a song, you know, based on the melody and the chords. But making tracks, you know, I'm thankful that I learned a lot of technique, that when you have limitations, especially in that way, it makes you think about the creation of sound in a completely different way, in the old analog way, you know. So I was doing that, and I was a friend of mine that I knew that had gone on a ski trip up to Colorado, who was also from Houston. He'd gone to a different school, but I met him, and he had a little apartment north of campus in Austin, Texas, called Hyde Park. It's a great old neighborhood. It's really expensive to buy property in there now, but back in the day, you know, you could afford to live there. And he was renting a place and had a couple synthesizers, a sampler, a 8-track Tascam, what was called a Porta Studio. It was on a cassette tape, and he had an old Mac Classic, which was the little boxy one with the tiny screen, with a real basic sequencer program that might have recorded maybe 1 or 2 tracks of audio as well. But mainly it was the brain that then ran over what was called SMPTE. You'd stripe a track, and SMPTE is a motion picture term, but it basically creates a code on one of the analog tracks that then it synchronizes all your instruments, right? So that everything's in time. So all this stuff now is all taken for granted. But regardless, my point being is he had the equipment, and so I was just working on music, creating little instrumental tracks. I wasn't even really a songwriter yet. Sorry, I've got a little bit. I've got a tobacco patch in my mouth.
That's all right.
He was he and I would just knock out music, and he loved making music. And his girlfriend at the time was a woman whose sister was the girlfriend of a young filmmaker named Robert Rodriguez. And Robert had got in touch with my collaborator Eric, and said, "Hey, I went down to the border of Texas and Mexico with my 16mm camera. I shot this movie. It's in Spanish. I need music for it. Can you do it?" And he was like, "Yeah." And he was actually a pre-med student, my old buddy Eric, and was really busy with studies. But and so I was picking up a lot of the slack with Robert, working on music, not even scoring to picture. Just let's listen to this Ennio Morricone track from The Mission, or Ennio Morricone is a famous composer who did all these spaghetti westerns in Italy, and so we were kind of using these templates of sonic templates to create music of what he wanted, and that film was really what got me into being a professional musician. It's a movie called El Mariachi, and you can stream it, and it was remade into a movie called Desperado. And so,
who was in that movie? I'm trying to remember. I mean,
there aren't any name actors in El Mariachi, but in Desperado, Antonio Banderas is the main actor, and Salma Hayek plays the love interest. So basically, it's the same story as El Mariachi, but remade into a Hollywood picture.
I heard they use the same kind of camera setup, though. That's why I'm wondering why I heard that.
Yeah.
But anyway,
maybe so, and I don't recall what Robert's strategy was involved on that picture, and I wasn't involved in that picture or his later pictures. I ended up moving. I got a call that summer. I'm out of school. I'm living in this little funky little house with this buddy of mine. We called it the Goat House because we had this idea about getting a goat and putting it on a stake so it would just eat all the grass in front of the yard, because we were both lazy, pizza delivery guys or whatever we were doing at the time.
Right.
And it had the old screw-in fuses. It was and basically no insulation. So it was hot as hell in the summer, and Texas summers are not something to be trifled with, and cold in the short winter months. But I think the whole point of all this is that I feel fortunate that I was surrounded by this amazing kind of community of young filmmakers and musicians as well in Texas. And then I got a call from my old songwriter, Barry, on the landline at my house. And he said, we've got a band lined up. We want you to move to New York. And so that's what I did, and that kind of leads to a whole nother chapter of my life.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, because I know that I saw something, because, when you were doing the filming, the sound part with El Mariachi and all that.
Mm-hmm. The music.
Right. Was that like, did that inspire you to, because it seems like it would have been more into the producing, or did that help you record and create more of your music? Did that?
It's all part of kind of the journey and the learning process. I mean, because, but I was getting, I think at that time, I had started out being a creative person and a performing artist, and also I was an active poet and journalist, not a journalist in the news sense, but journaling, I should say. So I was really finding my voice, on paper and through shooting video. And again, I went to LA to USC thinking I was going to be a filmmaker. I loved acting. I loved singing and performing music, especially, in these music theater productions I was touching on. And but doing the soundtrack, definitely I was like, oh, maybe the universe is telling me something. I can move in this direction of pursuing music as a career. And so it all kind of fed into, what I was becoming and how I wanted to spend my life. And so after that time in Texas, I moved to New York in the early 90s and started a 9-piece band. And this is in the height of kind of the grunge era. So it's right, as bands like Nirvana and Soundgarden and the Smashing Pumpkins were all coming up out of that scene in Seattle, which was this rich hotbed of rock music. And in the top 10, at that time, that was pop music, was this very heavy rock music. But I went to New York, and my collaborator and the singer in that band, and I was mainly a lyricist and keyboard player. We created a band that harkened back to bands like Roxy Music and Eurythmics, and other influences. But we created a band. We had 3 backup girl singers, 2 white chicks and a black girl, and a guitar player, 2 keyboard players, and we played all over Lower Manhattan at clubs like the Pyramid Club on Avenue A. That was our main haunt. And the Pyramid Club now has been rechristened recently as a club called Baker Falls. But the Pyramid, I haven't had a chance to go back there yet. But the Pyramid had been a place where even Madonna had performed at, the Red Hot Chili Peppers. And it's not a big club, but it was this cool club that was still around and still kind of happening even in the 90s. And Alphabet City, the Lower East Side, East Village of New York, was the place to be, I think, especially at that time. And so many amazing music acts, gravitate to New York and have and will, I assume, continue to do so, even though the scene moved over, later on to Brooklyn and other places. As Manhattan kind of became more gentrified and harder, to find a cheap apartment to live in, honestly.
Right.
But we were creating music that was against kind of what was happening at that time. Like the cool kind of in vogue music wasn't really what we were doing, but we loved it, and we were having the best time and partying like banshees. And my friends in the band had an apartment up on 70th Street in the Upper West Side, which was big enough to rehearse in and take a bunch of MDMA night after night and just go nuts. And it was a really fun project, and it lasted maybe 3 years. And we talked to a few record labels, but we couldn't really get that lined up. So it kind of ran out of steam. And then, by that time, it's the mid 90s, and I really wanted to start playing more guitar and writing songs on another instrument besides just keyboards. And it didn't really fit in with the what was going on in that band. So I started a project called Valhalla. And Valhalla is basically, my last name is actually Knudsen. So I was born with a phonetically challenged last name. No one could ever pronounce it. And still to this day, it's just one of those names where, unless you're in Scandinavia, where the name comes from, or Northern Europe, people don't pronounce the K and N together. And you don't cut with a knife, and you don't, bang your Kanude. Right. So just out of kind of necessity, I needed to kind of take on another moniker for myself. And that's where Kanude comes from. And Kanude, we can talk more about that name later and how it kind of came to be. It's just a nickname of my last name. But the Valhalla project became my main focus, and I
the labor of love kind of thing.
Well, it just became the vehicle for my music. And I have a few albums that are available from that time, from the late 90s. One is just called Valhalla, the Valhalla Band EP. And that was a project we cut on Mott Street down below Houston, kind of in the Soho area, with a guy named Vinny Nobile. And Vinny was in a band called the Pilfers, and had worked with these guys like Bim Scala Bim, and I think the Mighty Boss Tones. He was affiliated with them, more like ska music out of Boston. And Vinny, hey, we have a Facebook user who says yay.
It just says yay.
Yay to you, whoever you are.
I think they're watching on YouTube, so it's popping up on.
Okay, all right. Well, so please put in your comments if you're logged in here on your lunch break or wherever you may be in the world right now. I'm happy to answer your questions. But yeah, so we cut that album, that EP.
You're doing my job, by the way.
Yeah, Yeah, it's my producer directorial instinct. Sometimes I have to tame that down. If I'm a hired gun, I'm like, okay, just shut up. Let somebody else.
You've already answered like 4 questions without me.
I just spinning my tails. Yeah.
Let's
Well,
go. Hey, this is what it's about, man. You're in your zone. I like it.
So Valhalla became that project in the later part of my time living in New York in the 90s. And I'm playing a lot of great clubs like Chennai, where Jeff Buckley used to play. And I'll tell a story about Jeff real quick. So Jeff, if you don't know who Jeff Buckley is, go out and find his music. He has an album called Grace. And Jeff was one of these kind of once in a generation singers that comes along and just is totally enchanting. You've probably heard his version of Leonard Cohen's song Hallelujah, which famously was used in the movies Shrek long after he'd passed away, and some other movies too. But Jeff, yeah, I'll tell a couple stories about Jeff. When I first got to New York, there was a woman who worked at Columbia Records that I had met in Stockholm, Sweden. When I was in school, I spent a year in Sweden, left Austin, and my dad was actually based there. So I was like, I'm going to go take a year off or a school year abroad and go live in Sweden where he was living. And I met a woman who what was that?
How was that?
Oh, it was amazing. I mean, like living in Europe for the first time. And I was so fortunate. And it's, looking back, it might have been the coolest pad I've ever lived in.
Really?
My dad had this house, and he's an executive. So like the company house that they had for him was pretty sweet. Mm-hmm. And it was on this little area called Lidingö in right outside of Stockholm. There's all these little islands. It's like an archipelago. And on his house, there was the main house. And then just down the hill, there was a little thing called the stuga. And stuga in Swedish means cabin. But it was a little house that had a little kitchen and a couple bedrooms. And the window had these big picture windows that looked out on the water. Uh-huh. And it had a hot tub that was under the stairs that was that had been rocked in, like almost like you're in a cave, and a sauna. So like I had my own sauna and hot tub, and I'll tell you, I had like everybody came to my house to party because bring your bathing suit, we'll get a bunch of beer, get some whiskey. And so I shot a little movie that I think it might be on YouTube called Swedish Women in Rome. I created a little film with a partner of mine, and we shot some of the scenes actually in that little cottage. And I had a great time. I was playing a little bit of music. I wasn't performing, but and not really actively writing, but I was still tied to the project in New York. And that was before I moved back to New York to join the band. Right. Anyway, I lost my train of thought. I was in Sweden for a year.
You're talking about a girl, somebody. I'm sorry, that was my fault.
No, it's okay.
You said some woman or something.
Oh yeah, I met this woman who was a music executive, and she had moved to New York. I had just moved to New York in late '93, I think it was. And she's like, "Hey, let's get a car. We're gonna get a car and go down to New Jersey and go see this artist that's got this album that he's recording right now up in Woodstock."
Right.
And so I'm like, oh, cool. Yeah, I'd love to go see some music. So we drive down to Asbury Park and we go see a show at a place called T-Birds. And that became a venue called the Saint. Might have been like 100 capacities, kind of place, not very big. And there's Jeff with his Telecaster doing his thing that he'd done at Chennai, which is just playing solo guitar and singing. And the room, you talk about pin drop. Everybody's like basically slack-jawed at this guy because he was he was like from another world almost. I mean, his voice, and if you get into Jeff Buckley, which I did, and you go back and listen to his father's music, which I did recently. His name's Tim Buckley, and Tim Buckley is kind of a folky era, late 60s, 70s recording artist that was on Elektra, and incredible music. I mean, and it just, you'll see, over the course of a number of albums, he was lucky enough to record like 6 albums maybe in his lifetime, died of an overdose, sadly. But Jeff, amazing music. But I'm standing there at the end of that show, and I'm just, a wannabe singer-songwriter, and there's Jeff and me and Jeff and John Bon Jovi, New Jersey hero, meeting for the first time, talking to each other. And I have seen I know who John Bon Jovi is because of Living on a Prayer, and he's a huge rock star. And I'm looking at him going like, oil and water. like, whoa, I mean, these are two completely different type of musicians. And everybody that got to know Jeff became a super fan. Even people like Brad Pitt and people sing the praises of Jeff. But Jeff, we were acquaintances, and he was already kind of well into a different track on his career and becoming who he was. Fast forward like 4 years after that, I'm walking down. This is the Valhalla era for me. I'm walking down 2nd Avenue with a buddy of mine, an actress named Lorca Simons, and Lorca and I were tight, and I'm like, see a guy walking up the sidewalk in the opposite direction. I'm like, Jeff, hey, what's going on, man? He's like, oh yeah, hey man, how you doing, man? What's going on? And we had like a 5-minute conversation, and he tells me, yeah, I'm about to fly back to Memphis. I'm working on this new album, and even then, like a month later, he drowned. Jeff Buckley drowned in this rock and roll incident where he was taken from us at age 27 or 28.
Goodness.
He's part of that club of Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin, Amy Winehouse, people that died in their late 20s way too early. And it was such a heartbreaking time for me. And I'm happy to have known Jeff and played Shanae and all those clubs in Lower Manhattan, in the 90s. So yeah, my point being, I've always gravitated to interesting places. And that time in the 90s, things were changing. The music scene was changing. The DIY ethic was kind of coming into view for what the internet might become. And so I recorded my first proper album after that EP, the Valhalla EP, and it was called Versicle. And I recorded that with a guy named Brad Albetta, and I haven't talked to Brad in a long time, sending Brad a lot of love. Brad had been in a band called Marry Me Jane, which was signed to Epic Records, I think, a division of Sony. And he played in my band for a bit. And Brad went on to marry and is now divorced from a great artist named Martha Wainwright. And they have kids and whatnot. Rufus Wainwright's sister and Loudon Wainwright's daughter. And so that Valhalla album we cut with a bunch of amazing New York musicians. And I delivered, and kind of to dovetail on that ethos, I don't have a record deal. I get some money together. I'm going to put this record out. I'm going to, on my own, and just create my own little record label called Lightstone Records is what I came up with. And I've got a logo for that, that I've had since that time, or since actually the logo was created by my guy in Houston. I'll get to that later. But regardless, there was a company that was just coming up that somebody told me about called The Orchard. And now The Orchard is a mega organization owned by Sony Music. But at the time, they had a little office on Orchard Street, which is in the old kind of Jewish garment district where all the tenement buildings are in the Lower East Side. And so they called themselves The Orchard, and they were on Orchard Street. And The Orchard was, if not the first, it might have been CD Baby. I don't remember which one came first, but The Orchard was one of the first companies to offer artists and, small labels a distribution for their physical product, and also this new thing, digital distribution. And in that short little window, the late 90s to around 2002, before Apple came in with iTunes, it was kind of the Wild West. Napster popped up around that time, but they, the industry was kind of forming this new, it wasn't even streaming at that time. It was digital downloads. Streaming music came a little bit later when the bandwidth allowed it to. But that's how I distributed my first record, and continued to play shows, and then met somebody that got married to. I moved to LA for a while. This woman, my practice wife, I call her. She's a German-speaking actress. And then I moved to Berlin, Germany. So like my journey just keeps, just gypsy troubadour life. The Valhalla project moved to Germany for a while before, during, and after 9/11. And I could tell so many stories about that time. But yeah, I continue. And a lot of that music is unreleased, actually. I had a Roland digital 8-track, which my version recorded on these things called zip discs. And if you don't remember what those are, they were like little hard drive discs that you put in. And I think they had like 250 megabytes, which at that time you could record, probably like 45 minutes worth of music on one disc, multi-track. And so there was no tape, and it recorded at 16-bit, not 24-bit, which is kind of the standard now. But but that's the ratio, sample ratio of CDs, or 16 bits. So if you buy a CD, if you remember what those are, kids, CDs are the compact disc, digital disc you can buy music on. You still can. So I have tons of music which eventually will see the light of day that's unreleased from the Valhalla era. So yeah. And Berlin, and a funny thing about Berlin, which I'll talk about briefly, living in Berlin at that time, when back to Sweden, the year I lived in Sweden, it was the fall of 1990, and our school trip was to take, thank you, there's my logo, Lightstone Records, ta-da, da-da-da-da. And so, oh yeah, this is cool. I'll touch on this real quick. Excuse me. So my designer, who's done all my artwork, most of it since the late 2000s, about 2008, is this guy named Mike Frost, and he is a fantastic designer out of Houston and does all like the Swisha House records, people like Paul Wall, Chameleonaire, Scarface, all the whole Houston hip hop scene, which evolved out of this guy named DJ Screw, who did this slowed down stuff called Chopped and Screwed, which was pitch shifting the vocals down so it's real slow and syrupy, and cough syrup. Everybody's taking cough syrup to get high back then. Anyway, Lightstone Records is kind of a spiritual concept for me, is that we're all like stones shining out, shining our light into the world. And it was something I came up with to represent my spiritual kind of motivation, my MO, my feeling about what the human species is, which is we're all on a track to move towards ascension in some way, shape, or form. And so that's what the light stone is, the light shining out of the stone, right? But anyway, back to Sweden. So it's 1990, and our school trip was to take a trip. And these are all American students and a couple Canadians. So we're studying the language of Swedish. We're studying other stuff in English at the University of Stockholm. And we take a train down to the southern tip of Sweden, to this little town called Malmö. And then we took a ferry from Sweden over to East Germany, and then another train to East Berlin. And it's a year after the wall has come down, the Berlin Wall, which was a pivotal moment in 20th century history of the Cold War, which created what Germany became, which was a divided country where you had West Germany and you had East Germany, or here, if on the camera, here's West and East, right? The reverse. And Berlin was like a little island of West Germany and East Germany. And so people who lived in West Berlin, and you go back and listen to David Bowie and Iggy Pop, those seminal albums of Bowie from the 70s, Low and Heroes and Lodger, produced by Tony Visconti. I'd love to be able to meet Tony someday. Were all recorded in this amazing creative vortex of West Berlin, which was really like a cultural island and like a physical island surrounded by a wall. And the rest of it, outside of it, was East Germany, which was called the DDR, where it was basically Soviet controlled, right? Completely different culture, completely different everything. And we come into East Berlin, and I still remember there was some, East German kid in the train station, and we're all like, hey, oh, you're Americans? Oh, cool. And he speaks English, and he pulls out like a little Glock. Hey, you want to see my, look at my hand. We're going, whoa, man, pulling out a gun in public like that. But we were actually, spent the majority of our time in West Berlin, and we were there for the reunification of East and West Germany with George Bush, the first president, George Bush I, and Helmut Kohl, I think, was the PM of Germany, of West Germany, and we were at Brandenburg Gate with 1 million people, for this celebration with these huge video screens and all the news, the CNN and ABC, NBC, everybody, the BBC, were there for this massive celebration of Germany's two countries reuniting after 40 years, right? Incredible. And one story I've told year after year is at the end of that night, the TV cameras are done, the PA loudspeaker, the speech and everything, and the celebration, the clapping is kind of settling down. And there was a crane in the middle of Potsdamer Platz, which is right where the Bundestag is, where the government is now in central Berlin. And on this crane was hanging a car called the Trabant, Trabant, Trabant. And the Trabant was this crappy little East German car that, you know, if you were a good party member of the Communist Party or in East Germany, you know, you might get one after a 10-year wait or whatever. And somebody in the middle of the crowd like had rocket launchers or something, and they start trying to set the thing on fire. So there's like rockets shooting up trying to set this car on fire. And the rest of the night is kind of a drunken blur. But I still remember them trying to set the car on fire, and we're all like, we better get the F out of here, you know? And fast forward a decade later, I'm living in LA with my ex. I'm making music there, but I don't really have a band project, and nothing's really kind of business-wise on the music front coming up for me. So I moved to Berlin with my ex, who was really busy as an actress. And I'm living in this place that I had visited a little over a decade before. And it was truly remarkable to be part of that and have, you know, I'd say the opportunity, but really it was just kind of how my life led me to live in another country, which I hearkened to be like New York in the 70s. It was cheap. There was amazing artists. I remember seeing Peaches, who's a hip hop artist who was living there at the time, doing these incredible live video kind of DJ stuff with those kind of glitchy like videos of stuff that, you know, that she's on stage and there's her, you know, videographer, kind of video DJ doing all this incredible stuff. And just amazing music, and that was a really special time, and that's where the Valhalla project evolved while I lived in Berlin. Eventually, I didn't have enough resources and a team in place to go on tour and really get the project to the next level. And there's kind of more behind that story. But regardless, I moved back to the U.S. and I moved back to Texas. You know, I moved to Houston, where I'd grown up, and the place I said I'd never live in again. You know. That love-hate relationship with the town right. you're from, you know, which a lot of us can relate to. And that started a whole new life and evolved into, you know, the Kanude project, which leads me today to where I'm at now, you know.
Well, let's get to that. Let me start by saying that's pretty fascinating stuff so far. And I like how you dressed the grunge there, because I was a DJ for many years. I actually still am at that point. You know, everything from the club into the, you know, whatever. But I also dabbled in at the very incept of Detroit's EDM world.
Nice.
I know a lot of those people. In fact, I stepped out for a while, and a few years ago, my life changed right before COVID. We talked about it off the air, and you know, and I recognized the spirituality of you a long time ago when I first met you, because I kind of caught glimpses of it. And then you did something really special at the beginning, and I really appreciate what you did.
Absolutely.
Because I know people know about, you know, what happened in my personal life with my son, but shortly after COVID came. So when I was grieving alone, the world changed I remember people telling me, because it happened in September of 2019. I'm not going to get too detailed into it.
Yes.
I do that my own thing. But what had happened were you and I and many other people connected for that, you know, because there's stories, and I'm going to get to that with you, and how you did that. My story was really fast. You know, people kept telling me a few months after what happened, that 2020 was only a few months away, and they said this was going to be a magical year. Everything was going to change. I'd be better. I'd be healed. You know, I might ascend into the heavens, that kind of thing. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, then it brought me to this point where I was letting out on social media, which probably was the most adverse thing anybody could possibly do as a person or parent, whatever. But then I started to think about what I let go of as a kid. And for a long time, I would write words. I remember even being in high school, and I'm a couple years older than you are. And so that takes me back several generations. And I just remember I always wrote words. I could be working at a grocery store, in the bathroom, in the car, anywhere. And I would always write titles and songs. So I amassed about several hundred at that point. And I thought, well, maybe I'm nuts. And I kept trying to reach out to people, blah, blah, blah. Okay, it never happened. Well, then one day I just said, you know, where's the place to go? Because I've been in New York. I was even a Billboard reporter. And, you know, in fact, I was in the World Trade Center a month before it went down. And wow. I was down there when all the clubs. I was waiting for you to mention Webster Hall. You know,
oh, yeah.
Yeah, and so I was all over Manhattan, And I thought, okay, do I want to become an electronic music DJ, using Ableton and all this other stuff that came around? Pro Tools was for me. And then all of a sudden, I remember going, let's go to Nashville. Because I've driven through there many times, but it was country western back then. I bought furniture in Murfreesboro. I really liked the sound. I could see it was kind of building up, but it was nowhere near the size or status quo of LA. Those are the two places, Los Angeles, New York. Chicago and Detroit are kind of like B level when it comes to that.
Right.
Eminem might.
Depending upon the music you're into. If you're into blues, obviously going to Chicago would be one of the meccas.
Right. So, but Nashville somehow became where everybody started migrating to.
Yep.
And all of a sudden, I'm hearing a beat. Can you hear that?
Yeah, I hear it, but I don't think it's coming from me.
Maybe it's coming from me. And I've got a background reducer on my mic. But anyway, so getting to Nashville, I went there, and the first place I landed was Winners, then Bluebird Cafe, the two places you go as a songwriter. And I'm more, even though I write the melodies and harmonies, I said, I write lyrics a lot and whatever. Well, I ended up at this place. I think you kind of did too, with the same person, Danny Nova, the Danny Nova band situation. I don't know if you remember that, a few months back. And then I saw you a few times. And my favorite part of Nashville isn't like probably everybody else's, but it's like watching who does what. I mean, not just the powerhouse people, because I was sitting with record label people a year and a half ago. My buddy who works for iHeartRadio took me there, and we were at the Omni for the country radio seminar. So we're meeting all these big people, producers, executives, everybody that was anybody, right? Kid Rock's people, everybody.
Yep.
And all the new faces, Lainey Wilson, whoever.
Yep.
But when I got there, I went to two different places. There were Division Street, where the songwriters go, then of course the outskirts, like the listening room and all these other places. I think you probably have played all of it, and that's where I'm going to in a second. And it's going to be all about you, because this is where I'm trying to, this is why I reached out to you a few weeks ago. I only reached out to like probably a dozen people in the scheme of things, because there was a lot of people I met, and that probably would have done what we're doing today. But there's a uniqueness. There was so many people that are talented, but they're trying to clone. And I got to say this carefully, because I want people, but they were cloning what was already done. And I said, we don't need that person. We need a new version of that. We need a better version, not a better, an alternative version. And so when I saw you, you had your own flavor. I call it flavors. I think we all have our own unique flavor. And I love, like, you didn't hear about these certain energy drinks or craft beers or specialty drinks and things like that. And they become mainstay as far as what we're doing. I think music, the way you've expressed it, and you said it earlier on, was that you weren't trying to jump on the grunge band with Pearl Jam and everybody else. You were, because when you said you had backup singers, I'm like, I don't think they ever did. You know what I mean?
No way. Totally not in vogue at that time. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, I love that you did that too. You put your little message there. In fact, I'll put it here. I'll even do this.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. And so those are the things I want you to know. As a DJ that's played every kind of music under the sun, from clubs to corporate to radio stuff, that's my sixth sense as far as what I was. And when I went to Nashville, I see a lot of people doing cover bands every night, and on the hot spot called Broadway.
Lower Broadway.
Lower Broadway. That's the place where everybody migrates to 7 days a week.
That's why they call it Nash Vegas.
Nash Vegas, right. And I think, and there's nothing wrong with people going down there and the bachelorettes taking over and things like that.
I wrote a song called Party Bus that
Party Bus. Yeah, oh my God.
It's basically it's going to be a hit. Like, I got to find the right chick to sing it. It's like a female empowerment song that name drops Lizzo and, body image and feeling good about yourself. And like, we're going to hit the party bus. It's a fantastic song, but it's really, basically, I could play it now if we want.
Play it. I wrote a song the other day. I wrote a bunch of them actually because of Nashville, and I wrote one called Babysitter. And somebody asked me, "Is that about you dating your babysitter?" I go, no. It's like, I don't want to be the baby. I don't want to be your babysitter. You know,
Yeah.
it's an upbeat, upbeat stage kind of.
Here, I'll play a verse and a chorus.
Play
So
I want to hear
it's
here, let me
yeah,
get
yeah.
rid of this.
So basically, this would be a premiere. Eventually, this will be cut by somebody, but it's. I was so down in the dumps, all of my blemishes, lines, and my humps. My sister called me just then. Said, girl, you know it's time to forget those nasty men. So we booked a party bus. All my girls, yeah, all of us, riding on the party bus. Flashy gurgle, flashy cowgirl, party duds. Yeah, we took the party bus. All my girls, yeah, all of us, riding on the party bus. Flashy cowgirl, party duds, riding on the party bus. Something like that. So, yeah, I mean, that's that whole scene that I'm totally not a part of. And I've met great musicians. You know, I've met some of those guys that play down there for up to 4 or 5 nights a week, 4 to 5 hours with no break, cover songs where, you know, the drummer and the bass player will get off and smoke a cigarette or whatever, and like the singer will do like a little kind of acoustic-y kind of song. I mean, you talk about being in the trenches. That is it. And you can make some scratch, and Nashville is its own beast, you know, and it really is a special place. But that's not for me. You know, I'm an original music artist, and so I'll go out of town and play gigs, and I'm still building up my schedule, you know, of kind of Nashville area bookings. But that really is its own kind of scene, and it's the tourist mecca for Nashville's that area for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I don't want to, I'm not, you know, I got to be careful in saying, I'm not trying to besmirch anybody that does covers.
Of course. Yeah.
I just couldn't, you know, being a DJ for so long, when I would do like, you know, parties, they always want those, it depends. I mean, if you're like an electronic DJ or somebody that's playing like a real specialty, like a, you know, Latin club or hip hop club or whatever. Right. But I know that most of the songs that have been playing for years, like I love Def Leppard. I was there when they came out with those records by Mutt Lange, you know, as far as, you know, was it Hysteria and things like that. Have
you seen the Shania Twain documentary that came out recently?
No, I just watched the Taylor Swift documentary that just came out, and the Ed Sheeran ones. I love documentaries.
Yeah, well, Mutt Lange, obviously, you know, if you don't know, watching, was married to Shania and was instrumental in her career in creating the sound. Mutt Lange had produced Back in Black by AC/DC. I mean, I listened to that cassette ad nauseum in 7th grade. I had 3 cassettes: Back in Black, Lover Boy, Everybody's Working Off the Weekend for the Weekend. Yeah. And like Asia, and a band called Asia, which was a big band in the early 80s.
The heat of the moment. I know that.
You know it, man. So like, yeah. I listen to Back in Black like over and over again.
Well, he also did I mean, I think he did Elton John for sure, and then I think he was actually the reason that he changed Def Leppard. He made them do things they didn't want to do, and they became huge because of that.
Oh yeah.
So, you know, but what I was going to say is like they picked one out of 10 or 20 songs from their catalog, which is Pour Some Sugar on Me. Same thing with Bon Jovi. You mentioned Bon Jovi. You know, there's a lot of songs that they could do. They always do Living on a Prayer. They have these particular staples that they make these kids play, or whoever that decides to play these things. And then when I'm walking down Broadway it could be a Wednesday, a Friday, whatever, and all the windows are open, especially this time of year. Yeah. And I'm hearing like 19 versions of the same song from 1987 or something like that.
It's really interesting how in, you know, the country music capital of the world, it's a lot of rock music, you know, that gets played in classic rock. Well, it's those songs are so good, and you know, I'm fortunate. Like I've got some new recordings I did that are not out yet, and I locked into a couple cats, you know, who play with everybody. I mean, and one of my new friends and collaborators, a guy named Chris Rodriguez, who played with Kenny Loggins, Keith Urban, Amy Grant. Oh, amazing musician, just a new brother.
Yeah, I love Keith and Kenny.
and they have he has a couple projects. Chris and Bobby, the drummer, where I produced some new tracks of mine at his studio. They have a band called the Nashville Alternators, and they play around. They played the Analog at the Hutton Hotel recently. They play at this place called Fox and Lock down in Leapers Fork, which is a cool spot south of Franklin. It's like a small town that's got a few, like this one club called Fox and Lock, and it's all that their bread and butter is, and a lot of the musicians play with some of those acts, like is all classic rock from mostly the 70s and 80s. And Chris has another band with Jay from Rascal Flatts called Generation Radio, and they're basically they're all A-list guys that some of them have been in big projects like Rascal Flatts, and they play these high-ticket, high-dollar private events mostly, and that's and they're all at a stage in their careers where they're not trying to like chase down original music deals or progress as artists necessarily. But it is interesting to be in a circle of people and going to see them play, especially at some of these alternate venues. If you're on Lower Broadway, you'll hear some of that music, but these guys will play like Steely Dan and, some really eclectic and some of the most amazing 20th century music ever recorded. I mean, sure. Steely Dan has got to be one of the top bands of all time. Sure. But for me, like cover music, I hear what you're saying. Like it's easy to kind of when you're especially as a songwriter and an original performer. Hold on, I got to take a quick break. My cat is just meowing in my ear like crazy. I got to let the cat out. Come here.
There you go. See the pants? That's pretty cool. Yeah, we met back in fact, he was mentioning Jay DeMarcus from the Rascal Flatts. And when I met, the reason I was at a place called Donato's was because I was there with Nate Peck, who now is singing opening. He did Great White, and then now he's covering for Firehouse, the actual band. And we went there, Donato's, because Jay DeMarcus was instrumental in getting that location and putting that stage in, but then nothing ever happened.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So that's how you ended up on that stage the first time I ever saw you play.
That's funny.
So that was kind of one of my things as far as get into it. And I was just talking while you were taking your break because I wasn't sure when you were coming back. But anyway,
No, I mean, what I was going to say is about that, it's great to celebrate the canon of American music, especially that time period that you and I grew up in, which still, I talk to people occasionally, industry people, streaming experts and whatnot. My kids, they love that music because the songwriting and the performing and the recording of that period, especially the mid 70s to the mid 80s ish, was this pinnacle of industry, technology, the analog era especially, and right. great artistry, great music that was driven by pure artistry in a lot of ways, and some of the most epic music ever recorded is from that time period. So it's really no small surprise that those songs hold up in the modern marketplace where you do have a lot of this, okay, let's write 4 chords, put an 808 drum in there, you build up the dynamic, and then it drops, and the chorus is the same thing, just with a hook, but over the same pattern of music, same 4 chords or 3 chords or whatever. And it's all dynamics, meaning, loud, soft, basically. And there's some awesome tunes, but a lot of those tunes, I don't know if they'll hold up over 50 years or longer to some of the songs that were written in kind of the golden era in a lot of ways. But regardless, my point being about some of those bands that I'm fortunate enough to be checking out and collaborating with some of their members is it's rekindled my love of a lot of that music, especially the classic rock that I grew up on from that time period. My first record I ever bought, I'll still remember. I'm in Houston, Texas. I'm like 7, 8 years old. I've saved up my $6 of allowance, and I'm sitting there with my 12-inch at the drugstore where they sold LPs at the time. Of Queen, News of the World, famously with the robot on the front, which has buddy, you're a big boy, big man, playing in the streets, gonna be a big man someday. And we were talking about it before, Kiss Destroyer, which has Detroit Rock City and all those great songs. And I sat probably for an hour looking at the art and just the song titles and everything, just absorbing it all. And I picked Queen, and it was probably the right choice for me because Queen is really a cornerstone artistically of a band that explored multiple genres. They were kind of like the Beatles on steroids, and with a singer that was, if you've never seen the Wembley Arena show with Queen, that's on YouTube and streaming, go and watch it right now. It's Freddie Mercury at his highest peak of performance, just with the crowd is like butter in his hands, having them do call and response with la 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 in the crowd, 80,000 people do that back to him and whatever.
Right.
And I ended up getting the Kiss record, but and some of that music is just so near and dear to me, and so like rediscovering that in Nashville of all places, which like you were saying, as a kid, I didn't grow up with country music. I grew up, my dad's record collection, I talk about it in my song Headphone Kids, which is on my 2008 Kanude debut record that I cut at a studio in Houston and also at a few project studios in Austin, Texas. Has a song called Headphone Kids. And Headphone Kids is me reminiscing on that time growing up. And my dad actually had a reel-to-reel tape deck where he recorded. It was like, a bigger version of a cassette deck, but like a big one, open reel tape deck. And so I memorialized me as a kid listening with, where the headphones took up basically my whole head at the time, of some of that music that he listened to, which was the Beatles and like Peter, Paul and Mary and the Byrds and all his 45s from when he was a kid in the 50s, the Elvis Presley, Bill Haley and the Comets, all that kind of stuff. And so I mean that we're informed by what we're weaned on, music wise, and usually that's your parents' music or your older brothers and sisters if you have them. I didn't have any older siblings, so I'd go over to my buddy's house, and sneak out at night and go drink Jack Daniels and wind up on my back porch with my mom, like coming out in the morning, and there I'm curled up on the back porch on a hot summer night in Texas as a 13-year-old, like true story. But I'd go to his house and he had older brothers and sisters. He's a guitar player named Adrian. And his older brothers and sisters had like the Led Zeppelin and like Pink Floyd posters on their bedroom walls. And so I'm like in the Stones. So I'm getting exposed to all this music, of my friends' older siblings,
Right,
one of his older brothers was in a band, a high school band. This is around 82 maybe, called Nirvana. That was their band. They actually had a band called Nirvana years before the band Nirvana came up out of Seattle. Funny enough.
And David Grohl, huh?
Exactly. So I don't know what the whole point of all that was, but it was about Nashville. Oh, the point was I didn't grow up listening to George Jones and Tammy Wynette and Johnny Cash or anybody like that. So I grew up listening to FM radio, 97 Rock, Moby in the morning, get your lazy ass out of bed. He was this DJ in Houston on one of the main rock stations. And so that was what I knew and what I loved. And I always thought Nashville, and even at that time in the 80s, I was like, why would I go to Nashville? I'm going to go to New York or LA, like you said before, because that seems like the right decision for me. But Nashville's changed a lot, and it's really growing on me. I'm so glad. And, and my personal life has got some ups and downs right now. But at the same time, I'm having all this amazing opportunity and building a new tribe here for my next record. And it's such a rich and supportive community, and it really is like no other place. I mean, honestly.
I gotta agree. Let me step in for a second, because I'm also not only asking questions. I'm also a music lover. I'm also a fan. I'm a fan of artists, a fan of you. Like I said, I write music, I play music. I do the best of both worlds. Because either you're writing it or you're playing it like a DJ, as far as somebody that gets paid to perform music in front of crowds. Right. My job as a DJ is to go through insurmountable amounts of CDs, records before that. Now I can just sit there and look at somebody's phone and they're going to give me like 19 versions of a song 50 years ago.
Amazing.
200 of one that just came out last month.
Yeah.
And you said something about time-honored music. I think most of the music that I've seen the last 10 years, because I belong to record pools, and I was, I see a lot of it disappearing, even if it's been on the charts for like, 3 months or something. And then 2 years from now, you can't even play it. But yeah, you can play something 20 years ago or more. In fact, most of the music I played 30 years ago in the early 90s, dance music, hip hop, club, booty shaking, whatever you want to call it, even Nirvana, even all those other things, they stood the test of time, and everything before that, like from the Beatles on up. Something happened, and now they're not playing. You would think like in Detroit, and I suspect many other places, and not just metropolises like that, but they're playing like the latest version of some club song or Bruno Mars, who hasn't been on the charts in like 2 years or so, but they're playing that. They're not playing the other stuff. I wonder, because you mentioned something. You said a lot of things. I wish I was writing it down.
Okay.
But you said something about building your tribe. I've seen one thing. I see that you are really into the meccas of it. I'm always watching you, like your posts on Instagram, and and I see it really fast, and I go, wow, he's here tonight. Oh, he's here tonight. And you're on the billboard, or whatever you want to call it, that you're playing on this Tuesday, Wednesday, this way, and all these little different cities and little places around, these little singer rounds or these performance kind of things. So I see that you're very active. Your work ethic's pretty amazing. And
Thank you.
I guess a sidebar just for a second about Broadway. I wish that they would allow those kids, or anybody, because I have this particular belief, and I'm sure you share it, that every single person, man or woman, boy or girl, that comes to Nashville from anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world, they think they're the next big musical hope and dream. Like they think they're going to be the next whoever you want to label it to, like a Taylor Swift or somebody. Right. And I think that they have that song or set of songs in their head that they want to bring to the world, like you do. Sure. And I wish that they would allow these kids to play, or anybody that plays these 4-hour sets for tips, a chance to play like once every 15 minutes, or at least a half hour. Like, hey, you know what? We're going to play our own new song. Or the keyboard player has a new song. Or, hey, welcome Kanude. He's got, this great song. Would you guys, the audience would embrace it instantly. Of course. Yeah. Why not? We're drinking. We got in free. Why won't they let them play?
Well, I think to answer that question, there are places that do. One of them that I'm in talks with, and I haven't booked a date with, is actually across from the Hard Rock, and it's called Acme Feed and Seed Store, or something like that. And that is, I was referred to them by a collaborator who said,
that's in Jolston, right?
What's that?
In Jolston?
Jolston.
Oh, it's a city outside of Nashville.
No. It's right at the bottom of Lower Broadway, right in the heart of what you're talking about. It's called Acme, and they focus on original music. And there's even a cool area, right off Lower Broadway. I've performed at a couple clubs that are literally a few blocks from Lower Broadway. It's called Printer's Alley. It's a really cool little scene, and there's amazing musicians like Alley Taps. I've played there, and you're not going to get the crowds that you're going to get right on Lower Broadway and the walk-in traffic. There's a great club called Bowie's that I've been up on stage there. They do a lot of rock music, and you can pepper in originals, and sometimes they'll do cover nights, but you have to find that scene, and it may not exist. I mean, when I lived in New York, I wouldn't go play in Times Square, it's just, you have to go where people are interested in what you do. And there's plenty of opportunities to play original music, write arounds, making decent scratch. That's another challenge in Nashville, unless you're doing privates or house concerts, which certainly there's that too. And you should do that. And that's something that I'm continuing to develop, in the area to make a living. But yeah, I appreciate the sentiment. Because it is Music City, but it's more than Music City. It's Songtown, and it may be the last remaining Songtown. The Brill Building in New York City, Jerry Goffin and Carole King. Those days are long gone. And I lived in New York at the very kind of wispy tail end of the Bowery era, where you had CBGBs and great bands who I was so fortunate to be able to see David Byrne perform American Utopia on Broadway a couple years ago, which is his non-talking heads show. And I actually just went to see Stop Making Sense at the Belcourt Theater, which is a great little art house in the Belmont Hillsborough district of Nashville, because they just released Stop Making Sense. And people were up singing and dancing in the aisles, you know, and some of that music is some of the best music of the late 70s into the 80s.
Yeah,
and
they broke the mold with Talking Heads.
Oh my God, you know. So when I was in New York, it was kind of the tail end of that era. But it takes leadership, it takes the right kind of people, industry people, publishers, labels, and there's plenty of great original music. I mean, I've gotten to know a guy named Paul McDonald recently. Shout out to Paul, I love you, man. And he has a little festival called One Big Love that he does periodically, and he had a big one during Americana Fest. And he is one of those local guys that's a super talented musician, amazing performer, and just his energy is so supportive and loving of the community and original music and new music and people coming up. And so it exists. You won't find it at Kid Rock's Club or the Honky Tonk Saloon.
That bothers me. It bothers me.
That is a different model, and it's all about people drinking and just, you know, having a wild time, you know. And
but it gives people the wrong. I don't mean to interject, but it gives people the wrong impression, because I am from Detroit, and Detroit loves its music. I mean, Kiss. They even talked about it on a Howard Stern interview a couple months ago. Mm-hmm. They said we're going to do our last one. Him, you know, Gene Simmons and.
Our last final tour.
Right, yeah. Like when Hell Freezes Over with the Eagles, you know, and they're still playing. I'm sure Elton John will come back, you know, whatever. I mean, they come up on a wheelchair. I mean, they don't care. Look at Phil Collins, right? But they just love it. Peter Frampton was supposed to stop. He's coming. I mean, you can't stop. But what I was going to say is that when I first saw, what shifted me is I started doing these big parties that had nothing to do with, you know, music, but I saw Kid Rock at the place, and this big theater held 3,000 people in Detroit. It was probably one of the biggest clubs, and he had a teenage mosh pit. It wasn't women 40 and over that would follow him with the cowboy hat and their half tops on, and they're not. It wasn't any of that, and he had Joe Stevie, little kid flipping off their audience, but the thing was that he was allowed to play in a place far bigger than any place in Broadway. I don't care what stage you have in Broadway. And he was allowed to say and play whatever he wanted. And there was F-bombs constantly and everything you could think of. And, you know.
Was that venue in an area where there's a lot of cover music, or?
Well, it was a DJ club. It was dance music, yeah.
Right. But you're saying, I'm just trying to kind of get a picture on that environment and that culture versus like Broadway, which is a different.
Well, yeah, it's a place called Mount Clemens outside of Detroit, about 25 miles. But the thing is, it's a very popular area. But what I'm going to is that even though Detroit had Hitsville, Motown, probably that is the most timeless music on earth, I think. That's just me.
Some of it for sure.
Yeah, right. Stevie Wonder, come on.
Oh my God.
And Michael Jackson. But anyway, what I was going to say is that Nashville knows better. And it used to be a small town. Now it's $20 to park per hour, you know.
Parking in Nashville is ridiculous.
It's stupid. And it wasn't even that way 6 months ago. Crazy. And so LA and everything invaded. They're taking over. They're building skyscrapers that cost you probably $2,000 for a one-bedroom apartment. And it makes it tough for these musicians playing on tips. And, you know, like, again, they could probably make some decent money. And that's what they call paying your dues. But they should also allow, if they're going to use that as part of the mantra to get people motivated to step on stage, then they should say, again, this is my musical politics, is that I think that they should allow you and everybody else to have a moment in front of the biggest crowd in Nashville. Because like you said, you got to play all these little tiny places like a feed store or this place, or like the Flamingo. And I think it is where I think that people should walk in there from any part of the world and say, wow, was it Kid Rock's, or was it Luke Bryan's or Miranda's or wherever, pick someplace and say, you know what, they got to play. Like right now, we're going to feature on this girl who's about to sing a song she wrote. She does, you know, she's doing the Cranberries, she's doing all these other things, but now they should give their shining moments every hour on the hour. You understand? Like,
yeah, I understand.
And I totally believe that. And I think because a lot of these artists are getting discovered on TikTok, and, you know, they don't have to, if you're going to leave your home to come there, I think you should do that. Now, you have a different personality. Plus, you have years of history where your personality, you can pretty much walk through any door, at least from what I've seen, because you're always playing, you're always active, you know how to do it. A lot of people have been down there 6-7 months, and I don't see them. I go, have you played anywhere? He goes, no, I can't get in at the here or the Whiskey Row or the Whiskey Jam or like, and they've been here. And these are young, very vital. They probably have a lot more energy than most people. But they don't know how to get in.
You have to, and I'll do a few PSAs here. You have to find it, and you have to work hard at it because like you're saying, it's hard getting those gigs on Lower Broadway, and it's not for the faint of heart. There's if you're in Nashville, if you are a songwriter, a performer, you make original music, and that's what I do. Go Monday nights, my friends Tony and the band, they're called the Blue House Band, and I think their Instagram is @BlueHouseBand, I believe, spelled like you'd think. There's a place called the Vinyl Lounge, and it's a vinyl cutting plant. The address, you can look it up, but anyway, I think it's on 4th Avenue. It's not too far from downtown. Every Monday, they have an open mic jam with a band. So basically, this is something, there's 2 of these I'm going to mention. The first one is Monday nights. Blue House Band hosts an open mic where anybody can sign up. You send them a chart, or if it's simple enough, you just explain it to them. You get up on stage, you perform your song with a live band. And anybody in it, there was a guy I met at NSAI, I think. No, I met him. Where did I meet him at? Oh, no, I met him at the Bluebird. So we talked about the Bluebird Cafe, the mecca for songwriters. Monday nights is the open mic night. I thought you were
going to say Bluebird.
I haven't done their Sunday night writer series, which you have to audition for every quarter yet. But I've done the open mic, and it's hard to get it because it's like you got to click on it right at 11 o'clock and try and get a slot in the morning. The day of, it's like a lottery, basically. And so I played there last Monday, I guess it was. And there was a young guy from Cookeville, from outside of Nashville, who's totally green and like, and I said, hey, come on to this thing over at the Bluebird. Over at Vinyl Lounge. And so he came over and he got up and sang his first time ever. And he's probably, 20 something. I don't remember. He's not super young, but young enough where he'd never even played an original song with a band. He played guitar in a band, I think is what he told me, but he never sang his own song with a band ever. And I was like, yeah, man, good job, And so those guys go there on a Monday night. Tuesday night, I even more highly recommend this one. It's called Pitch Meeting. Like pitch, like to throw a ball. Eric is the bassist and the MC for that band. Mm-hmm. And that's up on north of East Nashville. There's a place called East Side Bowl. It's a bowling alley.
Yeah.
Great music venue. They have 2 stages, a big stage, and then they have a side stage. But it's a pretty decent sized room. And they have a similar concept. It's an open mic with a band. It's a little harder to get on, and there's usually a pretty big crowd. But if you go there enough, and I think I might have gone on like the 4th time I signed up or something. And I got on when they were doing it at the Flamingo, funny enough, which is another small club outside of downtown. But that Tuesday night, the Pitch Meeting, go check it out. And if you're in Nashville, it's easier because you can go back every week and just make it like a point. That's what I'm going to do on Tuesday nights. And these musicians are amazing, and they have guest artists. And Hunter Hayes showed up, who's a pretty well-known country artist. He got up and sang some of his new songs. And on a week or 2 ago, you got to find that stuff yourself, and you got to ask questions like, hey, what can I do? Go to the Bowery Vault. That's a great little venue in East Nashville that has an open mic. Again, you're not going to make any money, but if you want to play your music either with a band or on your own, you got to go find that. And it's there. It's there for you. It may not be like you're saying, like during the sets at with the cover bands at Lower Broadway. So it's out there. You just and honestly, I had been seeking that because I'd been building during the pandemic, like we all went through. I'm in Richmond, Virginia. I've got a wife. I've got 2 kids that are teenagers right now. I actually rented a studio here to start producing other people in February 2020 at a prominent studio in downtown Richmond. Literally a month before lockdown. That was a 6-month write-off where I had a room in their studio with all my production gear. And a lot of it was just bad timing. But and there's some cool little kind of scenes here. And in most markets, you'll find like open mics and stuff. But the level and the appreciation and the sound quality of most rooms in Nashville, the PAs, the sound guys, the engineers running the shows, everybody cares about music at a higher level, and they expect high quality sound, high quality production, and generally high quality music. And so it may be intimidating when you're starting out, but you will find it if you come to Nashville and just start asking questions. But those are two great recommendations for open mics with a backing band. It's not a very common thing. Honestly, I can't even remember the last time, or if ever, that I've been at a club or been involved in a scene that had that kind of opportunity where you can play your music with a band, on the spot. It's fantastic.
So the East Side Bowl's one that has a band that provides.
Pitch Meeting is Tuesday nights at East Side Bowl, and Blue House Band is Monday nights at the Vinyl Lounge. Definitely, those two are two great things to be part of.
Yeah, I think I saw you at one place. You're right, because I was at a place called Hideaway Jane's last week.
Where is that? I forget.
Some people brought it there. They had like a bluegrass band up there, but they had a really nice QSC system and then a satellite system that threw through the room, so it flowed nice and even. And being a guy that uses equipment, I was like, wow, this place was. And there was a nice looking crowd, and it was like, cool bartenders, and they had a menu for food and stuff like that. But it wasn't right. It's probably like less than a mile from Broadway downtown. And so I think that a lot of these places are starting to capitalize on it. And I think that that's what, like, I love, because, when I used to sit there and chart for Billboard years ago, it took me 8 years to become one. And I was on for a little while, but, when you're telling people from Madonna's label and, like, no, that's not, I can't make it a bullet. You start to remember these things when hundreds of people every day are trying to, this was back then. And so I know it's more than that now, where everyone's trying to get their due, and you have to go through this long, arduous process. So you giving your insight right now is really valuable, because because a lot of people I see stammer and struggle when they go to the NSAI meetings, and they go to these things, and they're hope and dreams, and then you see them 6 months later, and they're maybe an inch further than where they were before. Yeah, and some get lucky, and some know how to just whatever. But it's like, overall, you're right. Nashville does have something right now that's easier to, let's put it this way. I was in Manhattan a year ago, and I've been in Manhattan. It's $200 for 2 days to park there. It really is. And not that Nashville is not super far behind, but there are a lot of hidden places and little gems here and there that you can go to, where you can park the car pretty much safely anywhere. You can go inside for free, and you can you can network, and you're always going to meet no less than one or two people, or a couple of people that are in a group that are really friendly and say, Some may say, no, we don't want to write. We don't want your music. We don't want to collaborate, because we've got so much of our own that we're trying to create. But then you find somebody who goes, let's try it. In fact, we said Stockholm, Sweden. I wrote lyrics to 4 songs last week, and these guys from a pitch meeting online that I've been dealing with. One was from Vancouver, one was from Sweden. The guy from Sweden, Stockholm, his name was Tobias. He actually wrote all the music and everything in less than an hour. And I thought, there must be something in the water out there, And,
Max Martin, forget about it. Max Martin's the king.
Yeah, right. So, so you've enriched us with that. I guess, here, let me just play a little clip. This is now I showed it to you earlier. What? Oh, yeah. You want to give me a little lead in?
Is this the Saxon Pub?
I'm going to play a minute of it.
Is this the one on YouTube?
Here, let me see if I can add it to the page.
Can I talk while it's?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I can't believe that was 9 years ago.
The drummer's just still.
So the drummer here is a a guy named Donnie Wynn. Well, I'll let it play for a second, then I'll talk.
Where's your hat?
I don't have the hat.
Get down. Feel your feet on the ground. Fly. Feel your head above the sky.
You can. Let's go ahead and turn it. You want to end? Yeah. So that's so funny. I was playing through this amp that I had for a while called a PV Deuce. That thing was loud as fuck. It was like 100-watt amp. Anyway, yeah. And Austin, Texas is an amazing scene, and I lived there for a number of years, including when I spoke about before when I was in school.
Where haven't you lived?
Yeah, Donnie Wynn on the drums. I love Donnie, and Donnie Wynn, that drummer. He was Robert Palmer's drummer, and Robert Palmer in the '80s, in the late '80s, was all over MTV and had a song called "You're Gonna Have to Face It, You're Addicted to Love. Might as well face it," with the girls with their slick back hair and their like black shiny dresses. Donnie was the drummer. The drummer for Robert Palmer, was on the cover of all the drum magazines and everything. And I remember one time he lived in this little humble apartment. I'm like, dude, you've played Wembley Stadium. You've traveled all over the world, played these huge rock tours in the 80s. And like, you're playing clubs around Austin. That's a great club called the Saxon Pub down on South Lamar in Austin that I play at sometimes. And I'm like, what is it, man? Like, what's it like? He's like, well, like rolling up a J. It's just another gig, man. He was the coolest dude. And Brad Hauser, playing bass, passed away not too long ago. Brad, the bass player, was the bassist and founding member of Edie Brickell and the New Bohemians, which was a big band in the 80s, pretty big alternative band. So
Didn't she marry Paul Simon?
Married to Paul Simon. That's exactly right. And so, I had some really amazing cats that I played with, and I've always made it a point throughout my career as a musician and performer to find the best people that I had access to, either in the studio or on stage. And I've been lucky in that way. But part of it is, like you're saying, is just being out there and just opening your mouth and saying, hey, what are you doing? You're like, hey, like I've got this gig, and just, trying to bring the best music to the table that I can. But yeah, it's so funny. That was a while ago, and it's almost like another lifetime when I was living and performing around Austin, Texas. But yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's a song called Americhronica, which Americhronica is kind of my sort of genre I created for myself. And it's also a song that shows up on my 2017 record, Colors. And this is really cool. When I was making that record, which I recorded in Chicago, actually at a studio, and the reason I recorded the basics in Chicago was because the drummer, it all goes full circle, is a guy named Matt Johnson. And Matt Johnson, not the guy in the band The, which was a big English band. Matt is a drummer who was in New York and was Jeff Buckley's drummer on his first drummer, and it was on that album Grace. Go back and listen to it. And I was like, Matt, I really want to record with you, man. When do you have time? And at the time, he was on tour with a great Dallas-born Texas artist named St. Vincent. And she's just, Annie Clark is incredible music. But anyway, Matt was on tour with her, and he only had a couple days where they were off, like in Chicago. And I said, all right, I'll book a studio. And so we cut the basics with a local bass player there. And And my concept for that record, going back to your influences, what I did was, and this comes up in so many conversations, it's fantastic. What I did is I have in a little wooden box all of my concert tickets. And kids growing up now, you may not be able to have this unless you really put your mind to it, because most concert tickets are now on your phone, right?
Mhm.
But back in the day, you had a paper ticket. And I had them all for decades in a little box. And I scanned all of them in. And so you can see right here, my first concert I ever went to was Supertramp,
Supertramp.
September 17th, 1983.
Wow, 40 years ago.
$13.75 right there.
Get a
And
drink
this
for that.
and this concert, you can see the state of Texas was in Houston, which is right about there. And it was at a place called the Summit. The Summit was an indoor arena like
Mhm.
Bridgestone, maybe 16,000 people. And it's where the Houston Rockets NBA basketball team used to play before they moved downtown to their present stadium, the Toyota Center. And what I did was I scanned in all my first concerts, and you can see it's like Supertramp, ZZ Top, The Police, Yes, and the list just goes on and on. Van
I'm
Halen,
jealous you saw Yes.
Prince, the Prince and the Revolution, Purple Rain tour, Tom Petty and Dylan. And then it gets like more alternative. PIL, which was Johnny Rotten's, John Lydon's side project. The Cure, David Bowie, and then I'm in LA. I saw U2, the Joshua Tree, at LA Coliseum twice. Depeche Mode, Rush, Pink Floyd, Grateful Dead. It's like the monsters of rock.
Right.
The Mission UK, Elvis Costello, King's X, which is a great Houston band from the early 90s. Rush again. The Monsters of Rock tour in Sweden. The Grateful Dead again. AC/DC, I saw them in Sweden. Lollapalooza, the first Lollapalooza, which was Perry Farrell's project, which still goes on. Anthrax and Public Enemy. Nirvana, I saw Nirvana in a little club called Liberty Lunch. Fishbone, one of the best bands I've ever seen and probably will ever see live is Fishbone. Chili Peppers, Metallica, Mr. Bungle, Soundgarden, on and on. Pat Metheny, X, the Galactic Cowboys, Lenny Kravitz at Radio City Music Hall. I saw Radiohead at Radio City Music Hall for their OK Computer. My point being is I scanned in all these concert tickets, and if you buy my album, stream it, whatever, it's called Colors. It's the last full album that I released. I had my guy who designed this logo do all the artwork, and the cover of the album is all my concert tickets with my name at the top. And on the back side, which you'll only see on the LP, which has the song titles, is like an old Atari game of like a shooter game with the concert tickets as like on a black background. But I don't know where that story was going, but it was so much fun. And I really put a lot of effort into, concepts for the artwork for my records. Because to me, that's equally as important and as enthralling and engaging for me to go through the process of what this record really, what this album, what this single means, and how to kind of, and when you're a music fan, especially if you buy vinyl, you study the artwork, and it's a real joy to be able to do that for my work, and to really put a lot of effort and thought into it.
I hope they bring album covers back. Well, let me see. I guess because I know we've been on for a while, and I don't.
Yeah, I know. We can kind of slowly wrap it up now.
No, we good. Well, we can, because I do have a 2:30 appointment here in Detroit, but which is about 45 minutes away, a little bit more than that. So
Okay.
let's.
Somebody did ask a question. Can we discuss the women in
Go ahead.
Nashville?
Answer that one.
I responded back, what about the women in Nashville?
I saw that.
I don't even know really how to answer that. I mean, I think, and I'm a hetero man, and I love women, and maybe there's a stereotype, and that's why they're asking that question. I don't know who it is. It just says Facebook user, but like back to Lower Broadway, there's, it is a lot of people come in, the tourists come in with their pink matching cowgirl hats and boots and everything. And it's like a thing where you dress up like a rodeo star or like a country music star. And it's something to do. I met some amazing, especially musicians, some incredibly talented and soulful women people like Nikki Lane, or if you haven't listened to, you want to listen to some amazing music that is really from another time but exists in the present day, Sierra Farrell. She's from West Virginia. She's based in East Nashville, where I live now. But if you have a chance to see her perform, it's like Jeff Buckley. She has a voice that is completely undeniable and doesn't cater to country pop radio or anything like that, but she's making a career for herself. And there's so many artists like that, and women singers in Nashville. So I find people in Nashville, and you're in the South, of course, and I grew up in the South, or at least Houston, which is kind of somewhere between the South and the Southwest. And people are generally very open and friendly. And so just to answer that just on a baseline, I mean, I think women are like anywhere else, in Nashville. So
one of my goals to get more, because I haven't actually interviewed any women. I've actually approached a few that were very friendly and very receptive. There was one or two from the NSAI. Mm-hmm. And, the more you go there, the more they feel safer around you, because I told people, because people have asked me, I've been there several times for a while. And I said, here's the funny thing. I've been in the nightclub business for years, so meeting women was an easy thing, even just on a pliable, amicable level. But I'm not there. I'm not there to meet anybody. I want to meet artists. I want to meet musicians, songwriters, singers, people that write words on paper or play a flute. That's my goal. Yeah. And I'm from some backwoods town. I've worked with major labels and major artists before. In fact, Lenny Kravitz, when you said him, and you got kind of you touched this out. I hung out with him back in when he did the remember that album with the symphony. It ain't over till it's over and all that kind of stuff. Oh yeah. He was supposed to come in, and I was at a place where we brought in famous people, Ozzy Osbourne and Mark the Earth, Wind and Fire, whatever. And I just remember he came in, and I thought it was a really hot day, and he had a sound check about 25 miles away. I just remember I think it was like 89, 90. And he hung out for like 3.5, 4 extra hours. And I went up to him, and I remember this woman, we were talking and hanging out, and he signed my CD, and he was really cool. He's like, hey, you're young. Oh, yeah. And he was very cool and very chilled. And he had long dreads and everything and the sunglasses. And this woman comes up, and the bouncer stopped her. These two big bouncers. And she goes, my son couldn't get out of work. And all he wanted you was to sign an autograph. She's probably in her 50s or so back then. Mm-hmm. And then he says, hey, stop. And then he said, we go, Sue, to who? And he told the bouncers, he wanted to meet her. Yeah. And, especially a fan. And she was all whatever. And what really melted my heart was that he started asking her name, and she goes, oh, Italian. He started speaking Italian to her. Oh, cool. And he was just being very friendly and accommodating. And he's filming people going, we have a sound check we're supposed to do 2 hours ago. Yeah. He goes, me, because I'm good. I felt like, and he was like, you know what I mean? And everybody else would be kind of sweating and panicking. It was 100, it was 90 degrees outside, Nashville hot, And I was just saying, oh wow, he won me over. I didn't
get a chance to meet Lenny, unfortunately, not yet. But I remember being at that show at Radio City Music Hall in New York City, one of the finest venues. And if I have a chance to play there sometime, I'll be over the moon.
Yeah, he tried to make it up the hill at this place called Pine Knob, where Kid Rock and Bob Seger saw 5 times. 15,000+ people. Yeah. And he couldn't make it through to row 7 or whatever they call it, because they kept stopping. He goes, I want to go to the hill. He said, I want to go on top. And he even had bouncers trying to push him out of the way, and people just kept trying to mob him. Not in a bad way, but they just wouldn't they just were so in love with this guy.
Oh yeah. I remember being at that show and sit, it's a seated venue, but everybody was standing up. And it was "Are You Gonna Go My Way," which is his massive record in the early '90s. And I'm standing next to him, like, hey, man, and it was Fred Schneider from the B-52s, and we're both just having the best time, checking out Lenny do his thing with his crack band, and he's
great riffs, great intro riffs. DJs always look for the intro riffs.
Oh yeah,
Sweet Child of Mine. But when you're, are you gonna go my way? Yeah. type in before we, because we're going to close down.
Yeah.
Type in your contact information or somewhere like like your Instagram or whatever, because I'm trying
Yeah,
to post
I will.
information on
I will type. The best starting point is what's called Linktree, and it basically has a bunch of links to my stuff, to my other projects, my label. I have this comment has failed. Oh, maybe because it's a web link. It wouldn't let me post my web link.
It won't let you put your web link?
Let me see
I
if
put a
it'll-
web link under. Is that it? Linktree?
Yeah. It says this comment has failed to post.
Huh.
Anyway, do you see the link? Maybe you can copy that or.
Okay,
But,
so Linktree.
If you just type in Kanude on Instagram or Facebook or actually on TikTok, it's Lightstone REC, Lightstone Records.
Lightstone.
But that Linktree.
Is it .rec or?
It's link. What is it?
Or Lightstone, right?
Lightstone, because that's my label. Yeah.
Okay. .rec. I'll put it up there right now.
Well, that's just for TikTok. Is Lightstone REC. Lightstone.us. Here we go. Lightstone is the website that goes right now to Bandcamp. I also have a project called Light Body Sound, which is more of an esoteric kind of project that has a lot of kind of new agey music. It has a 47-minute piece called that I created during the pandemic called Breath of God. That's you put your headphones on, take 47 minutes, and go into a meditation, and you will trip. Take some mushrooms, do whatever you want to do, but don't be like that pilot that just got busted for like trying to down a commercial airplane after he took mushrooms.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah, I saw that this morning.
I hate those.
Organic.
He said he took magic mushrooms.
Yeah,
he said he took psychedelic mushrooms a couple days prior to that, which honestly gives a bad name to psychedelics when you see those kind of news stories, because it kind of demonizes the proper use of entheogens, which are another term, more of a clinical term for psychedelic drugs. And there's a proper way to do that. And if you do, use psychedelics and other mind-altering substances, do it in a proper setting. Do it with a guide. Don't do it if you have mental health issues. Really. This is stuff that's very powerful. So it's like drink responsibly, take drugs responsibly.
Right. But
regardless, Light Body Sound started out as a project with my ex and I. And it's like a synth pop kind of dreamwave record, and it's on streaming platforms. I'm not really pursuing that project as a live project right now, but it's music that's near and dear to my heart. And if you enjoy it, reach out to me. I'd really appreciate that. Listen to the Valhalla songs. Obviously, the new Kanude music is in kind of the hopper right now to be coming out for next spring and summer. And my goal is to have a new live act and hit the road again, which I haven't been able to do in quite a while. So I'm really excited about being based in Nashville, having new music coming out, building a new tribe there. It's just, I'm thankful to everybody listening now and in the future. And I'm thankful to you, Chris, for, meeting you and you doing what you do, which is pivotal. We all need a place to share our voice and what we do, and to be inspired by people, and also, potentially connect with new artists, new songwriters, new collaborators, new creative people, because we all need each other. It's really what it's all about.
Yeah. That's why my love of music, being a DJ, a songwriter, and liking people like you that have a really good heart, spirituality, a talent, a creative side. I love creative people. I really love creative people.
Yeah.
And people that are humble about it, like a Lenny Kravitz. And I've met many people like him. And I've met people that, I don't want to say their names, that were famous, but they weren't that humble.
Sure.
And now their careers are gone. And the people that knew how to navigate the right way are still on the lips and thoughts of everybody's minds, even years later.
Yeah.
So that's the real true secret, man. You can have your bad sides and your bad days. I do, but it's like when you're in the general public and you're around other people around you, you've got to let them know, hey man, this, I really want to be part of your life and part of your world, and you and mine, and vice versa, and that kind of thing. And you're that guy. I think you are.
Well, I appreciate that. And we didn't even,
you were so easy, just like that. He is very easy.
I really appreciate that. And one thing that we didn't even touch on, and we don't really have time to, is in the world that we're in now with AI, there are a gazillion songs that are being produced and released onto streaming platforms every single day. I think it's like 100 or 120,000 songs are uploaded to Spotify every day.
It was 60.
I mean, my listening queue of all the of people that I've met and that I know is hours long right now. I mean, I have to make time to listen to music because there's only so much time in the day. And honestly, if you're pursuing music, you know, the gold standard is still going to be playing in front of a live audience. And you have to cultivate that and get, and as a creator, as a performer, you know, until, and I talk about this with people, I mean, maybe in 10 or 20 years, you know, half of my band will be robots that I can pack away in a road case that I don't have to pay, you know, a hotel room for. They just stay with all the gear in a trunk somewhere in a van. I don't know if that's coming, you know, like if there'll be AI robots. And somebody was telling me like for $40,000, Elon Musk is able to create a functional human android at this point. It's coming, it's happening, but still we're all human beings, you know, and songs and music are about our experience and our hearts and reaching out to something that's deeper than ourselves and our community. And that's not going to change, you know? So my advice is just keep, you know, the live thing is really going to continue, especially with all of the content that's available digitally. You know, you have to connect with people, not just on what's recorded, but with who you are and how you present that in a live setting. So.
Yeah, I agree with you.
know?
Well said. That was really good. I think, you know, you really touched a lot on so many things. You gave a little dose of your talent. I want to talk for 2 minutes after we're off the air.
Okay.
So just hang on when we go. But if you want to play a little diddly, and I can just say thank you to Kanude. And you know, he's in Richmond right now, but he's going out. When are you going back to Nashville?
Friday. I'm back at the end of the week.
I'll be back by Sunday. So let's hook up, man. We'll go out and, you know, eat, or I'll come and see you play. I'd love to see you play. And
here, and we can fade out on this. This is the title track on the 2017 record Colors. It's called Born to Be Free.
Born, baby, born, you were born to be. Born, baby, born, you were born to be. Born, baby, born, you were born to be. Born, baby, born, you were born to be free. Make your choice, fight or flight. The middle of the road is no longer right. How could you know you were a slave? Did you know you could be so brave? Born, baby, born, you were born to be. Born, a baby, born, you were born to be. Born, baby, born, you were born to be. Born, a baby, born, you were born to be free. Today is the day of your birth. Your sweet soul reached down to the earth, and we celebrate the day. Yeah, we celebrate the day. Born, baby, born, you were born to be. Born, a baby, born, you were born to be. Born, a baby, born, you were born to be. Born, a baby, born, you were born to be free. Born, a baby, born, you were born to be free. Born, baby, born, you were born to be free. Yeah! Born, baby, born, you were born to be free.
Thank you, guys. Peace and love. Take care of yourselves. Be good to each other.